The grand hall of the alien empire was alive with lights and sound, though not in celebration. The polished floors reflected the glow of the massive crystalline chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Soldiers and scientists lined the walls, all eyes on the throne at the far end. Upon it sat the alien queen, her presence commanding and terrifying, even to those who had conquered worlds alongside her. Her armor was a masterpiece, centuries old and rumored to be unrepairable once damaged, forged from a rare metal found only in dying stars. But tonight, it was broken. Not in the way of cracks or dents, which were common in war, but in a way that made the queen's temper flare like the heart of a sun. Sections of the armor were glowing faintly with flickering energy. Some seams had shifted, and the advanced energy shields that should have encased her completely were failing in uneven bursts. She slammed her fist on the armrest of her throne.
"Who dared to touch my armor?" she roared, her voice echoing through the hall. The words rolled like thunder, and everyone present instinctively bowed their heads.
No one answered. The queen's eyes, glowing faintly with a mixture of fury and curiosity, swept across the room. Scientists, engineers, generals, none of them met her gaze. They had all been part of the maintenance of her armor for decades, yet none had dared to touch it in secrecy. The armor was sacred, after all. Tradition had demanded that no one ever tamper with it, even in times of war. Her patience was thin. The guards brought forward prisoners from recent battles, hoping to appease her wrath. Among them was a human engineer, a single representative of a species the queen had long considered weak and inconsequential. Humans had fought alongside other races, but they were rarely trusted with technology, regarded more as laborers than innovators. The queen leaned forward, her voice like steel. "If the one who repaired my armor does not step forward now, I will find them myself, and when I do, they will regret every moment of their life." The human engineer stood straight, heart pounding, aware that one wrong step could mean death. Yet something inside him urged him forward. The work he had done on the armor was delicate, precise, and dangerous, but he had done it not for fame, not for reward, but simply because it needed fixing. Slowly he raised his hand. I touched it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. A silence so deep it felt like the universe itself paused, fell, over the hall. The alien queen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it seemed impossible that she would believe such audacity. "You? Human?" she hissed, her claws curled around the armrest. "Do you understand what you have done? Do you even know what this armor represents? It is older than most of your colonies, older than your species." The human engineer bowed slightly, showing respect without fear. "I know it is sacred," he said, "but I also know it was broken. I did not repair it for disrespect. I repaired it because it needed fixing, or it would have failed when you went to battle." The queen's eyes, now brighter with interest, scanned him. Her voice softened slightly, though it carried the weight of command. "And how did you, a human, dare to know the secrets of armor that even my best scientists could not repair?" "I studied," he replied simply. "I learned what it does, how it works, and how to make it work again. I did not change it beyond its purpose, only restored it." Sometimes understanding comes from seeing things differently, not blindly following orders. A murmur ran through the hall. Alien engineers whispered among themselves, unsure whether to be outraged or impressed. They had spent years maintaining the queen's armor, following the ancient instructions passed down for centuries, yet none had been able to prevent its decay. And here was a human whom they had all dismissed, who had done what they could not. The queen's expression shifted from anger to something more complex: curiosity, interest, perhaps even respect, though she would never admit it aloud. She gestured for him to approach, and the human walked forward with measured steps. Every eye in the hall followed him, some with fear, others with awe. When he reached the base of the throne, the queen rose slowly, her towering form casting shadows across the hall. She extended her hand toward the repaired armor.
"Show me," she demanded. "Explain what you have done."
The human engineer nodded and began carefully pointing out the modifications he had made. The energy conduits here were misaligned, causing the shields to flicker. I reinforced the primary joints, but I did not add any new energy sources. The armor itself is old, yes, but it is still functional. I only guided it to perform at its original efficiency. The Queen's gaze did not waver. She observed the seams, the glow, the subtle hum of energy flowing through the armor. Something stirred within her, a recognition that humans might not have raw strength or overwhelming firepower, but they had ingenuity, the ability to see what others missed, the ability to solve problems under impossible circumstances. "This is impressive," she admitted, her voice low. "No one else could have done this. Even my most trusted engineers failed. Yet you dared to touch what even I consider untouchable." The human engineer looked at her and said simply, "Sometimes what seems untouchable is just too important to ignore." For a moment, the throne hall was quiet, the tension palpable. The generals and scientists shifted uneasily, unsure if they should cheer, scold, or flee. The human engineer's calm demeanor and quiet confidence were magnetic, impossible to ignore. Then the Queen spoke again, this time with a tone that was almost thoughtful. "If your work is as it appears, then you may have saved me from disaster. But tell me, human, why should I not execute you for your audacity?" The engineer took a deep breath. "Because if you do, your armor may not survive the next battle. And because understanding should never be punished, I only wanted it to work." She stared at him for what seemed like an eternity, the weight of her judgment hanging in the air. Finally, she sat back, a faint smirk touching her lips. Perhaps you are useful," she said, almost to herself. The human engineer felt a flicker of relief but did not relax. He knew the Queen's approval was dangerous. An alien ruler's interest could turn deadly at any moment. He had survived so far by thinking differently, and he would need to continue doing so if he wanted to see another day. The Queen's guards began to discuss the implications of what had just occurred. Some whispered that the human had achieved what no alien engineer could. Others feared that his influence could shift the balance of power within the Empire. But the Queen herself only thought of one thing: the armor. It was whole again, stronger than before, and perhaps, just perhaps, it could give her an edge no one else in the galaxy had anticipated. The human engineer was ordered to remain close, repairing other devices that had long been considered impossible to fix. And while he worked, he realized something remarkable. Though the Queen was fearsome, unpredictable, and powerful, she valued results over tradition. And that was a truth humans had always known. Sometimes, understanding and courage mattered more than brute strength. As he worked late into the alien night, repairing machines older than any human civilization, he understood something deeper. This was not just about the armor. It was about survival. It was about proving that humans, a species underestimated and overlooked, could change the course of galactic history. Not with weapons, but with intelligence, patience, and ingenuity. The Queen watched him quietly from her throne, considering what this human could mean for her empire. For the first time in centuries, she wondered if she had dismissed a species that could, in ways she did not yet fully understand, alter the fate of the galaxy. Outside, the alien sun dipped behind jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the empire. War was never far away, and enemies lurked in the void of space, waiting for weakness to exploit. Yet within the Grand Hall, a single human engineer had proven something extraordinary. Wow! He had touched the untouchable, repaired the unrepairable, and in doing so, had earned not just survival, but attention. Attention from an alien queen feared across the stars, and in the silence that followed, the human realized that his journey had only just begun. The next challenge would not be just about repairing machines. It would be about earning trust, navigating alien politics, and surviving the envy and fear he had awakened. And somehow, he knew that humans, though small and fragile compared to alien giants, were capable of far more than anyone expected. The Queen finally leaned back and whispered almost to herself, "Who would have thought a human could mend what we considered sacred?" And in that quiet moment, history began to shift. The grand hall had emptied, leaving only the human engineer and the Queen, though the guards lingered at a respectful distance. Outside, the sky of the alien world had turned a deep violet, with the twin moons rising over jagged mountains. The soft hum of the repaired armor seemed to echo in the silent hall, as if the machine itself was alive and aware of what had happened. The Queen did not speak immediately. She observed the human engineer quietly, studying his movements as he checked the nearby energy console, adjusting its readings with practiced hands. Despite his species' reputation for weakness, every action he took seemed deliberate, precise, and almost graceful.
"You have skills I have never seen before," she said finally, her voice calm but edged with authority.
"Explain to me how your mind works. Why can you solve problems that my most intelligent scholars could not?" The human straightened, wiping his hands on a rag he had pulled from his pocket. "I don't follow the same rules your engineers do," he said. "I look at the problem first, not the tradition. I think about what the system needs, not what it has always had. Sometimes, the solution is obvious, but no one notices because they are afraid to break rules." The Queen leaned forward, intrigued. "You are brave, human, or foolish. There is a very fine line between the two when dealing with alien relics." "Maybe," he admitted. "But I've learned that sometimes you must risk breaking rules to save lives." Her gaze held his, unflinching, as if measuring the truth in his words. After a long moment, she spoke again. "Very well. You will remain here. Not as a prisoner. Not entirely. You will repair the machinery that even my scholars fear. And if you fail," her eyes flashed with a warning, "you will regret it." He nodded, understanding the weight of her command. "I will not fail." That night, the human worked under the Queen's watchful eyes. The Empire's ancient machines were a mix of alien technology and materials so old they defied comprehension. Ships with energy cores that had gone dormant for centuries, weapon systems whose purpose had been forgotten, and defensive mechanisms that no one dared approach. All of them required careful attention. To a typical alien engineer, these machines were dangerous relics. To the human, they were puzzles waiting to be solved. As he began examining the first ship, a massive battlecruiser in dry dock, he noticed something immediately. The alien engineers had relied too heavily on energy shielding, ignoring structural weaknesses in the ship's frame. While the shields were powerful, the frame itself could not endure prolonged combat. No alien would dare touch it, fearing failure and disgrace. But the human saw an opportunity. With precise adjustments, he could redistribute the energy flow, reinforce critical joints, and allow the ship to endure attacks far beyond its original limits. Hours passed, and the human worked tirelessly, often muttering to himself. The Queen watched from above, intrigued as he measured, recalculated, and rewired. She had expected failure. Instead, she witnessed progress beyond anything her empire had ever achieved. At one point, an assistant engineer approached hesitantly. "Your Majesty? The human's methods are unconventional," he said, a note of panic in his voice. "He is bypassing safety protocols, touching systems that could explode, rewiring the main conduits without authorization." The Queen turned sharply.
And? The assistant's voice faltered.
"And he might succeed. I have never seen a machine respond like this." The Queen's lips curved slightly, a rare smile. then perhaps he is worth watching. By the next morning, the first ship was ready for testing. The human stood at the controls, analyzing the readouts. He had repaired the engines, reinforced the hull, and rerouted the shield systems for optimal energy distribution. When the energy hum reached its peak, the ship seemed almost alive, glowing faintly as power coursed through every circuit. The Queen observed silently from her throne. "Show me!" she commanded. The human initiated the test sequence. The ship's engines roared to life, brighter and steadier than they had in centuries. Energy shields rippled across the hull like liquid metal, adapting to every test the engineers attempted. Structural stress points held firm under strain, even when deliberately overloaded. It was more than a repair, it was a transformation. The Queen leaned forward. "Remarkable," she said softly. Her voice carried across the hall. "You have done what we thought impossible. You have not only repaired this ship, you have improved it." The human nodded, not seeking praise. Machines respond to understanding, not fear. If you try to command them without knowing them, they will fail. If you respect their design and learn their limits, they can exceed expectation. Word of the human success spread quickly through the Empire. Alien scholars who had once dismissed humans as insignificant began to whisper in hushed tones. Others, more ambitious or envious, feared the attention he received. The human, however, remained focused on his work. He did not seek glory, he sought results, and in a galaxy ruled by fear and brute power, results were rare. Days passed, and the human was assigned more projects: ancient weapons, dormant energy grids, starship propulsion systems. Each challenge was greater than the last, and with every success, the Queen's fascination with him grew. She began to understand that humans were not just survivors. They were problem solvers, thinkers who could see connections others ignored. One evening, while examining a derelict energy cannon that had failed during the last war, the human paused. The system was old, tangled with centuries of modifications. Alien engineers had tried countless times to restore it, each attempt ending in failure. But the human noticed a pattern that others had missed: a minor misalignment in the core conduits, a flaw that caused the energy pulses to destabilize. He adjusted the conduits carefully, recalculated the energy feedback loops, and rerouted the power flow. Slowly, the cannon hummed to life. Energy crackled across the surface without exploding, a steady pulse ready for use. The Queen, observing from above, could hardly believe her eyes. "This is extraordinary," she said. "A human fixes what we could not even touch." The human glanced up at her.
It is not magic, it is understanding.
You respect the machine, and it responds. You ignore it, and it will fail. The Queen considered his words. For centuries, her empire had ruled through fear and power. Soldiers, engineers, and generals obeyed commands, often without question. Innovation was rare, because risk meant death. Yet here was a human, fearless and methodical, achieving what even her brightest minds could not. She realized something then. Humans were dangerous, not because of weapons or strength, but because of their mind. A human could see possibilities that others could not. A human could adapt and overcome in ways that no alien tradition could prepare for. The next challenge came unexpectedly. An ancient enemy of the Empire, a fleet of mechanized warships known as the Shattered Ones, approached the outer sectors. They had been dormant for centuries, their technology forgotten, their power feared. The Queen's generals called for retreat, insisting that the Empire's ships were not ready. The human engineer, however, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, "your fleet is not weak, it is underutilized. If I may, I can prepare the ships to face them." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "Do you truly understand the danger?" "I do," he replied, "but I also understand how to use your technology in ways your enemies will not expect. Let me try." Reluctantly, the Queen agreed. The human began coordinating repairs and upgrades across the fleet. He worked with alien engineers, guiding them, correcting errors, and sometimes doing the work himself. His knowledge of energy flow, structural integrity, and system optimization allowed ships that had been considered outdated to perform at levels rivaling the newest vessels. As the fleet moved into position, the human oversaw final checks. The shattered ones appeared on sensors, massive, angular, and terrifying. Alien crews trembled, expecting death. But the human remained calm, adjusting power flows and firing sequences. When battle began, the difference was immediate. Ships moved more efficiently, shields held under concentrated fire, and weapons struck with precision that even alien commanders had never achieved. The humans' influence turned what should have been a rout into a controlled, calculated engagement. The shattered ones faltered under tactics they could not predict. Their attacks anticipated and countered. From her throne, the Queen watched in astonishment. The human had not led the battle, but his presence had changed its course. Alien admirals who had doubted humans now whispered in disbelief. This small, seemingly weak species had become the difference between victory and defeat. After the battle, the Queen summoned the human once more. "You have done what no alien could," she said. "Not through power, but through understanding. This is unprecedented." The human bowed. "I only did what I could." Machines and systems respond to logic and care, not fear. If you trust them, they can perform beyond expectation. If you ignore them, even the greatest weapon will fail.
The Queen considered this.
She had ruled through fear for centuries, but this human had taught her a lesson that power alone could never impart. She realized that humans, though small, fragile, and underestimated, could change the balance of the galaxy through their mind, not their muscle. Word of the human's success spread quickly through the Empire. Alien races who had once mocked humans now spoke of them with respect, or at least with fear. And the human, who had never sought attention, found himself at the center of an empire that both feared and valued him. In the quiet hours of the night, the human engineer continued his work. Ships, weapons, and systems long abandoned responded to his touch. He did not seek glory, but the results spoke for themselves. He had proven that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could achieve greatness in ways that others could not imagine. The Queen watched from her throne, silently acknowledging that she had underestimated this species. Perhaps humans were not the weakest in the galaxy after all. Perhaps they were the cleverest, and for the first time, she wondered what a human could do if given true freedom, not just to repair machines, but to change the course of history. The human engineer had become a presence in the Empire that could no one ignore. Each day, his work extended further into the Empire's technology, reaching systems that even the Queen's most trusted engineers had avoided. Ships, weapons, energy grids, communication arrays. He touched them all with the same quiet confidence, seeing patterns where others saw chaos. Yet with his rising influence came whispers. The alien scholars and military officers who had once dismissed him now watched him closely, their admiration mixed with envy. Some feared that the Queen might rely too much on a human, a fragile species considered barely capable of surviving in space. Others saw an opportunity, plotting to use the human for their own gain, or remove him entirely. The human, however, paid little attention to politics. His focus was the machines, the systems, the impossible. Every repair, every adjustment was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Yet he was not blind to the danger. He understood that his survival depended not only on skill, but on discretion and timing. He also understood the truth of the galaxy. Intelligence and innovation could be as dangerous as any weapon. The Queen summoned him one morning as a fleet returned from patrolling the outer sectors. Reports from the patrols were troubling. The shattered ones, the ancient mechanized enemy he had first helped the fleet repel, were regrouping in the border systems. Their ships moved with precision and coordination, and their technology, ancient and alien, was adapting in ways no one had seen before.
Your human ingenuity saved us once, the queen said as he approached her throne. Now the threat returns.
I will not allow your species, or mine, to be caught unprepared. The human bowed. I will not prepare what I can. But this enemy, they are not like your other foes. They adapt quickly. We cannot rely on the same tactics twice. The queen's eyes narrowed. Then you will help us find a new way. Show me what your mind can do when the galaxy itself is against us. For the next several days, the human worked tirelessly. He studied the designs of the Shattered One's ships, analyzing their movement patterns, energy signatures, and weapon systems. He ran simulations, cross-checking the Empire's fleet designs against what the enemy was likely to deploy. His approach was different from the alien engineers, who focused on raw firepower and brute force strategies. The humans sought weaknesses in patterns, using logic and insight to exploit the enemy's predictable behavior. He discovered that the Shattered Ones relied heavily on synchronized energy pulses to destabilize enemy shields. If the fleet could disrupt that synchronization, even temporarily, their attacks would fail. He proposed a radical idea, a fleet-wide recalibration that would interfere with the enemy's pulses using a counter-frequency. Something no alien engineer had dared attempt. The Queen listened carefully, intrigued by the simplicity and brilliance of the solution. "And you believe this will work?" she asked. "I do," he said. "It is not guaranteed, but it is the only way to turn their advantage against them." They expect raw power. They do not expect intelligence. The Queen considered his words. "Very well.
You will oversee the preparation of the fleet. Every ship, every system, every weapon will follow your guidance."
Fail, and we will all pay the price.
With the Queen's approval, the human moved quickly.
Alien engineers and officers followed his instructions reluctantly at first, hesitant to trust a human's judgment. But as he demonstrated, correcting errors and adjusting systems with remarkable efficiency, their fear turned into cautious admiration. Even the Queen's closest advisors began to see that this human was more than a mere tool. He was a strategist, a problem solver capable of seeing the unseen. When the fleet was finally ready, the human stood on the command deck of the flagship, surrounded by officers who had once doubted him. The Shattered Ones were approaching, their angular ships cutting through space like dark arrows. Sensors picked up the pulsing energy waves that had destabilized other fleets in the past. The human adjusted the recalibration frequency, watching the readouts carefully. The energy pulses of the enemy began to falter as the counter-frequency spread through the fleet's systems. Shields stabilized, weapon systems fired with unprecedented precision, and the alien crews moved with confidence rather than fear. The first engagement was chaotic, the Shattered Ones attacking with speed and aggression. Yet the humans' preparation held. Enemy pulses failed to destabilize the fleet, and alien ships struck back with coordinated efficiency that had never been seen before. The tide of battle shifted almost immediately. From her throne on the command platform above the battlefield, the Queen watched silently. The human had done more than repair systems. He had changed the rules of engagement. Alien admirals who had doubted him now recognized that the battle was no longer won by brute force, but by ingenuity. As the fight continued, the human noticed a pattern. The Shattered Ones, though formidable, were adapting to predictable responses. He adjusted the fleet's movement subtly, creating deception and misdirection that caused enemy ships to collide or fire on empty space. Each maneuver exploited weaknesses that the Shattered Ones had never revealed to their enemies. Hours passed, and the battle raged. The human remained focused, calm in the eye of chaos. Alien officers marveled at his composure, noting that even under extreme pressure, he anticipated every move. Ships that should have been destroyed survived, and enemy vessels fell in ways no one could have predicted. At one point, a massive Shattered One flagship emerged, bristling with weapons capable of obliterating an entire squadron. The human quickly recalculated, directing the fleet to split and create a diversion while concentrating fire on its energy nodes. The plan worked flawlessly. The flagship was disabled, forcing the enemy fleet to retreat in disarray. The Queen's voice echoed across the communication channels. "You have done what no alien could."
You have turned defeat into victory. I did not expect this.
The human bowed. "Victory comes from understanding, not strength alone. Your fleet has the power. My role is only to guide it." After the battle, the Empire celebrated cautiously. The Shattered Ones had retreated, their immediate threat neutralized, but the human knew they would return. What mattered most was that the Empire had survived, and humans had proven their value beyond question. Even so, the humans sensed something deeper was at play. Alien engineers whispered in corners, plotting, envious of the attention he received. Military officers questioned whether relying on a human strategist was wise, and the Queen, while impressed, was aware that a human mind was unpredictable, a potential threat as much as an asset. The human continued his work, repairing and improving. Ships received modifications that allowed for faster response times, weapons systems recalibrated for maximum efficiency, and energy grids optimized for fleet-wide support. He worked tirelessly, aware that every improvement increased both his influence and his risk. One evening, the Queen called him to her private chamber. The room was dimly lit, the walls adorned with relics of battles won and civilizations conquered. She studied him quietly before speaking.
You are changing this empire, human.
"I see it in the fleet, in the machines, and in the way my people respond to you. You are remarkable." The human bowed. "I do not seek power, Your Majesty. I only seek solutions." The Queen's gaze softened, though her eyes retained the edge of command. Solutions are dangerous. They can shift the balance of power in ways you cannot imagine. Yet, I find myself trusting you. Perhaps because I have seen what your mind can do. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Trust from the Queen was rare, but it was also a spotlight, one that could attract envy and danger. Yet he felt no fear. Humans were accustomed to risk. They survived by thinking, adapting, and solving problems that others overlooked. As he left the chamber, he reflected on the events of the past weeks. He had repaired ancient machines, improved a fleet, and faced an enemy thought invincible. Yet he knew the galaxy was vast, filled with threats that could not be solved by skill alone. The Shattered Ones were only the beginning. The Queen, watching him depart, considered what this human meant for her empire. She realized that power alone was insufficient to maintain dominance. Intelligence, creativity, and adaptability were equally important, and humans, she now understood, possessed all three in ways that no alien species could match. The human returned to the fleet, working late into the night. He recalibrated systems, optimized energy flows, and ensured every ship was prepared for future conflicts. Alien engineers observed him, some reluctantly following his methods, others openly learning from him. His influence spread quietly but unmistakably, shaping the Empire's military and technological future. Days later, reports arrived from the border systems. Small reconnaissance ships had detected unusual activity. Shadows of ancient war machines stirring in uncharted sectors. The Shattered Ones were returning, more organized and determined than before. The human studied the reports carefully, analyzing their movements and predicting their next actions. "This is not just a battle," he said to his assistant engineers. "It is a test, and we will pass it, not because of our strength, but because we understand what others ignore." The Queen, observing his preparations, realized that humans could be the key to survival in a galaxy filled with ancient threats. She also understood the danger. A human mind could not be commanded like an alien's. It had its own logic, its own priorities, and its own morality. Yet she found herself trusting him, perhaps more than anyone she had ever known. The stage was set. The Shattered Ones would return, and the Empire would face its greatest challenge yet. But with the human engineer guiding their strategy, the Queen had hope, a rare and precious thing. The human had proven that even the smallest and seemingly weakest species could shape the course of empires through intellect, ingenuity, and courage. And as he continued his work, the human knew one thing clearly: the galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. But humans, if underestimated and unafraid, could rise above every challenge. For the first time, the Empire truly understood that the human engineer was not merely a repairer of machines. He was a strategist, a problem solver, and a force capable of redefining the fate of civilizations. The Queen, observing the fleet ready for battle, whispered softly to herself, a rare tone of admiration in her voice. Perhaps we have underestimated humanity. And perhaps it is time to see what they can truly do. And in the quiet hum of the repaired fleet, the human worked on, oblivious to the politics, the envy, and the silent admiration, focusing only on what mattered most, preparing for the storm that was coming. The Shattered Ones approached once more, their fleet like a dark storm moving across the stars. Their ships were angular and unfamiliar, bristling with weapons that had destroyed countless worlds in the past. Alien officers panicked as sensors tracked the advancing enemy, expecting disaster. But the human engineer remained calm, analyzing the patterns of the Shattered Ones' movements and weapons. "Your Majesty," he said to the Queen, "this time they will not be surprised by our fleet, but we will need more than ships. We will need ingenuity. And we will need to think as they do, but faster, better, and differently."
The Queen, seated on her throne aboard the flagship, nodded. "You will lead our strategy. The lives of my empire rest in your hands."
Fail, and everything is lost.
I will not fail,
The human said, his eyes scanning the battle reports. We must anticipate their tactics and adapt in real time. Their advantage lies in predictability and brute power. We will turn that against them. The human gathered the fleet's engineers and officers, explaining his plan in careful detail. It was audacious. He would divide the fleet into smaller squadrons, each equipped with modified energy relays that could disrupt the Shattered One's synchronization. These relays were based on his previous work on the Empire's ships, improved to operate on a larger scale. He also introduced a sequence of maneuvers that would appear chaotic but were calculated to draw the enemy into traps. At first, alien officers were skeptical.
"This is reckless," one muttered. "We have always relied on firepower and formation."
"Your plan is unusual." The human smiled slightly. "Firepower alone will not win this battle. Brute strength is predictable. We must be unpredictable. Machines respond to logic, yes, but also to chaos that follows rules. We create controlled chaos."
The Queen, observing silently, allowed the plan.
She trusted the human's mind, even if her officers hesitated. The fleet prepared, energy grids humming, shields calibrated, weapon systems primed. Every ship, every relay, every pulse was under the human's direction. When the Shattered Ones reached striking distance, the human initiated the first phase. Fleets split, moving in patterns that seemed random, yet each ship followed precise timing. The enemy fired, expecting resistance along familiar lines, only to find gaps and misdirections. Energy pulses from the Shattered Ones failed to synchronize, their weapons missing targets repeatedly. From her observation deck, the Queen watched as the human adjusted the relay frequencies, maintaining the disruption of the enemy's systems. The battle began to tilt. Ships that had once struggled under enemy fire now held steady. Alien pilots, inspired by the human strategies, maneuvered with unprecedented coordination. The Shattered Ones responded, adjusting their formations. But the human anticipated these changes. He had studied their patterns extensively, predicting how they would adapt. He countered each maneuver with subtle adjustments, guiding the fleet like a master conductor leading an orchestra. Hours passed. The battle raged across multiple sectors, each engagement more intense than the last. Ships exploded. Debris floated in the void, yet the humans' calculations kept the fleet intact. The shattered ones, formidable as they were, could not penetrate the carefully engineered defenses. At a critical moment, the enemy flagship emerged, massive and bristling, with energy weapons capable of obliterating entire squadrons. The human quickly identified its weak points, energy nodes that, if disrupted, would cause cascading failures throughout the ship. "Prepare the concentrated strike," he ordered. "Focus all firepower on the nodes, but do not fire until I give the signal. Timing is everything." Alien officers hesitated. "This is dangerous. We may lose the entire squadron if we fail. Trust me," the human replied calmly. "We will not fail." The strike was coordinated perfectly. Squadrons moved into position, shields aligned, weapons charged. At his signal, beams of energy struck simultaneously at the weak nodes. The enemy flagship shuddered violently, its weapons flickering and systems failing. Within moments, it was disabled, drifting helplessly in space. The remaining shattered ones, seeing their flagship fall, attempted to retreat. But the human had anticipated this. The fleet adjusted, cutting off escape routes and forcing the enemy into a trap. One by one, enemy ships were disabled or destroyed. By the end of the engagement, the shattered ones had suffered a decisive defeat. The Queen, observing the battle's end, remained silent for a moment. Then she stood, her voice carrying across the fleet. "This human has saved the Empire, not through power alone, but through mind and skill."
I underestimated your species.
No longer. The human engineer, exhausted but unshaken, returned to the flagship's command deck. Officers congratulated him, yet he remained focused on the remaining systems. There were always repairs, optimizations, and improvements to be made. Victory, he knew, was not just about defeating an enemy, but preparing for the challenges to come. As celebrations began across the Empire, the Queen called him to her private chamber. "You have done what I thought impossible," she said. "You have changed the outcome of a battle that should have been lost. I owe you more than words can express." The human bowed, humble despite the praise.
I only did what needed to be done. Machines and systems respond to logic and care.
They respond to attention. The rest is up to those who wield them. She studied him carefully.
"Your people, humans, they are underestimated across the galaxy. I see now that they are capable of more than I imagined. You have earned my trust."
Perhaps even my respect. The human nodded. "Respect is earned, Your Majesty. I do not seek power only to solve problems. But if my work protects lives, then that is enough." Over the following weeks, the human continued his work, optimizing fleets, repairing ancient machines, and guiding alien engineers in ways they had never imagined. Humans were no longer considered weak or insignificant. They were recognized as invaluable problem solvers, capable of altering the fate of empires through ingenuity and courage. The Queen, observing the changes, realized that her empire had gained an unexpected advantage, not just in technology or firepower, but in understanding. The human engineer had shown that intelligence and adaptability could surpass brute force, and that underestimated species could hold the key to survival and victory. A council of alien leaders was convened to discuss the future. Many were wary of humans, fearing their growing influence. But the human spoke plainly, calmly, guiding decisions with logic and clarity. He proposed systems of cooperation, maintenance, and innovation that strengthened the empire without relying solely on fear. His suggestions were accepted, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes with admiration. The Queen, sitting at the head of the council, watched him work. She realized that humans were not just useful, They were extraordinary. Their survival depended not on weapons or brute strength, but on thinking, adapting, and solving problems no one else could. And in a galaxy filled with unpredictable threats, those qualities were more valuable than any army. Months passed. The Shattered Ones had retreated to distant sectors, their power diminished. The Empire rebuilt, stronger and more efficient than before. The human engineer, now a permanent advisor to the Queen, continued to improve ships, weapons, and energy systems. His methods, once doubted, were now taught across the Empire. Humans, long underestimated, had become a symbol of ingenuity and resilience. The Queen summoned him once more, this time not as a command, but as a gesture of respect. "You have changed my empire, human," she said. "You have proven that your species can accomplish what others cannot. I owe you my gratitude." The human bowed. "I do not seek gratitude, Your Majesty. I only seek to ensure survival, and to show that understanding and care can achieve what power alone cannot."
The Queen smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is the greatest lesson I have learned in my reign."
Power alone cannot sustain an empire. Understanding, ingenuity, and courage, these are what endure. And you, human, have shown us all that our assumptions may blind us to the truth. Outside the palace, the twin moons rose over the mountains, casting light across the empire. Ships moved through space, repaired, optimized, and ready. Alien soldiers and engineers worked together with humans, united not by fear but by respect for what each could offer. The human engineer continued his work, never seeking praise, but quietly shaping the future. His presence reminded the Empire that even the smallest, weakest, and most underestimated species could change the fate of civilizations. And as the Queen watched him, she understood something she had never truly acknowledged. Humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, problem solvers, and forces of change. Their value lay not in their strength, but in their minds, and in a galaxy of uncertainty, that was the greatest power of all. For the first time, the Empire looked at humans not as laborers, not as pawns, but as equals. Partners in survival, innovation, and the shaping of history. The Shattered Ones would return eventually, as all threats do. But now, the Empire was ready. Ships were repaired, fleets optimized, weapons improved, and minds prepared. And at the center of it all, the human engineer worked tirelessly, proof that one individual, underestimated and overlooked, could influence the course of empires and the fate of the galaxy. The Queen, reflecting on everything, whispered softly to herself, "Who would have thought a human could mend not only machines, but the destiny of an empire?" And in that moment, humans were no longer ignored, no longer underestimated. They had proven that ingenuity, courage, and understanding could conquer what strength alone could not. And the galaxy, vast and dangerous, had begun to change because of one human and the vision he carried into the stars.